What's going on? It's Matty O. Based on the resounding viewership and feedback I got from my first Harbor Freight wood chipper video, and thank you if you watched that video, I decided to take a deep dive with this machine, go into some of the things I've figured out in the past 6 months of owning it, using it. So join me. I'm going to go through some of the do's and the don'ts, address some of the questions and feedback I had on the first video, and overall just kind of take a closer look at this piece of equipment. And for what it's worth, this thing's held up great for me. I haven't had any mechanical issues with it. The only problem I've had with it, the clip for the wood chip bag string, there's a little plastic keeper for the string, and it's spring loaded. At some point that decided to find a new home. I don't know where it went. I would have tried to fix it, but in any event, I've got a small metal clamp that I use, and that seems to work just fine. So without further ado, join me. Let's get this outside, get some safety gear on, and we'll take a closer look at this machine. All right, well, let's talk about some safety gear. Everyone who recommended I wear gloves, good job. Y'all could be my dads if I didn't already have one. But it is good advice, and aside from the obvious sort of extra layer of protection for your hands, when you're feeding things into this machine, once the machine takes them, the material has the tendency to want to do its own thing, whip around, whatnot. There's vibration, especially when you're using the branch insert location down here. There's a reasonable amount of vibration. Gloves are going to protect your hands from anything wild going on. They'll shield you from some of that vibration so you don't get fatigued. Sound advice: use a high quality pair of gloves. These are some Ringer gloves. They got some knuckle armor and whatnot. I love them. Not sponsoring the video or anything like that, but just my personal preference. And everyone out there who recommended safety glasses, same thing. You'll want to wear some sort of eye protection when you're using this machine. There's stuff flying out, so I am wearing sunglasses. They are safety rated sunglasses. These are Goliath sunglasses. I love these things. I always wear sunglasses outside. That's just how I roll. They are rated for impact. Once again, they're not sponsoring the video either. That's my go-to. I'm gonna get suited up here. All right. So the first thing I want to do is just to kind of point out to everyone, starting the machine, if you are new to this machine or you don't own one yet, you're considering buying one, this machine has a massive flywheel. I don't know how heavy it is, but it's probably 20-30 pounds, something like that. So when you go to pull this thing, it's not like starting your lawnmower. It's got a little bit more resistance, a little bit more mass. It's going to take a little bit of effort. So brace yourself for that. When you go to pull start it, be ready for a smooth pulling action. I would resist the urge to kind of want to go in and yank the thing. Be ready for some follow through with pulling it. Be ready for the mass that will ensue. You also need to make sure that you're not going to hurt yourself if there's a piece of wood or something stuck in there. If there is any sort of leftover material in the machine, it could be that you have a scenario where the flywheel or the blade catches a piece of stick debris in there and fights you. It doesn't want to pull. So smooth, steady, be ready for any sort of debris in there. And I would almost do like a test kind of pull, just kind of make sure the machine is loose and spinning freely before you really throw your back into it. The point I'm trying to make there is just be careful. This is a smaller engine, but it is attached to a very large piece of spinning mass. You don't get hurt when you initially try to start it. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. Make sure it's powered down. I'll just kind of do a little test pull there, and everything seems nice and easy. So I'm gonna turn the ignition on, I'll turn the fuel on, and I'll turn the choke to choke on, and we'll see if we can get it started. One pull. The next thing I'm going to do is I want to actually try to jam this machine. Now, this is something I would advise you not to do. When you go to turn this machine off, it's going to spin down. Here again, it's because of that massive flywheel. If you are feeding material through it as you're turning it off, you can run the risk of jamming it. Let me demonstrate. So when you feed material to slow the machine down as you're stopping it, what ends up happening is as it slows down, it's not spitting the material out, and now you run the risk of jamming the machine. Don't ask me how I found that out. I'm one of those people who tends to learn the hard way. And I'll show you. I'm gonna turn the ignition off once again, and you can see I can't pull it anymore. I've just jammed this machine. So now that I've got this jammed up, I'm gonna take the opportunity here to show you how to clear a jam out of it. Let's do it. All right, gang, so on the back of this machine, there is an access panel. There are 3 bolts here. You can access these with a 13mm socket, at least on my version of the machine. I don't know. Sometimes they change the hardware. I'll just go ahead and loosen these up. Now, Harbor Freight does say to clean out before each use. Practical? No, I don't think that is practical. That's why I recommend trying to slowly pull the machine. If everything spins freely, in my experience, I've had no problem starting this machine without cleaning this out. Really, the only time I've had this machine jam is when it stalls as I'm feeding it, or I've shut it down and decide to be a prankster and shove material down it. It does a pretty good job, as long as it hasn't stalled out or bogged down, of keeping itself cleared out while running. So if you pay attention to what kind of material you're feeding through here, the rate at which you're feeding it, you can probably avoid most scenarios where this thing gets jammed. So we'll set those things aside, and now we have access into the actual inner workings of the chipper assembly. So on this side, we have the hammers that do the final shredding and whatnot. You can see that any sort of loose debris may end up in the bottom of this part. But my guess is beyond this, in here, you have the actual blade for shredding your branches, and that tends to be where material will get stuck. I'm gonna slowly spin the engine and see if we've cleared our blockage. We have not. All right, so if the other side of the machine appears to be clear, you could have a blockage in here. Now, it's not too hard to take off this feed tube to gain access to this area. What's happening is there's a blade on that flywheel that shears the wood as it comes in, and it'll get stuck when the power is removed from the machine. I'm gonna demonstrate taking off the chute so we can do this the proper way. Once again, these are 13mm nuts on my unit. And there's 3 of them in total. Okay, now with our chute out of the way, it becomes rather obvious what's going on. So that's really all that was holding this up. You can see, and keep your hands out of it, make sure the ignition's off. You slowly turn it over, and you'll see that we've just cleared the blockage. Installation, reassembly is just the opposite of taking all this stuff off. So I'll get it back together and we're gonna shred some material. My favorite approach to shredding wood going into this machine is having my handy dandy battery powered reciprocating saw on hand. Now this is more than enough saw for the job. This is the 20-volt DeWalt. I've got the 9 amp hour battery on there. Essentially, any quality reciprocating saw is going to be able to help you prepare whatever you're trying to feed into this machine into material that's ready to go in. I'm going to sort all the wood that I'm processing into 3 different piles. I'm gonna have the material that's gonna go in the brush feeder. This is gonna be your twigs, your leaves, anything between a 1/2 inch, 1/4 of an inch. I'm gonna make a pile of that stuff. I'm going to make a pile of the sticks that are up to 3-inch diameter. So this is your 1/2 inch to 3-inch range, your larger pieces of wood. I'm gonna make a pile of that. Within that pile, I'm going to make sure that all of the material is nice and straight. Anywhere the material takes a different angle, I'm gonna cut the material there and try to keep everything straight. And then finally, in the 3rd pile, that's my reject pile. That is just pieces of wood that are too large to go into this machine. I'm gonna separate that out and I'm gonna do something else with it. Basically, you need to be cognizant of the type of material you can feed through this machine and the type of material you can't. This chute does a pretty good job of gatekeeping for you, but I have found it's easier to learn the limits of this machine and err on the side of safety. If you start to get to a point on your stick diameter where it's getting too wide, call it, cut it there, put it in the reject pile. So before I get to shredding, I need to make sure my machine is prepped. Now, while the engine is still cold and you haven't been operating it, that is the best time to make sure your fuel level is full. So I would recommend filling this thing up, checking the oil before you get going. Yeah, we look good. And I just filled this up, so I'm good to go there. I do highly recommend using the bag to collect your wood shavings. You can run it without the bag in place, but keep in mind you're going to have very little control over the discharge of this machine. There could be wood and dust flying. There is going to be some dust regardless, but this makes it a little bit more manageable. You don't want to be installing this bag once the machine is operating, and we'll snug that up on there. And you'll need to keep an eye on this as you're operating the machine. I've noticed sometimes it tends to slip off. So this piece is definitely right about at the 1/2 inch mark. Something like this, I would be comfortable saying I could feed it through the brush hopper without a problem. So I'm gonna put that in my brush pile. Now, a piece of material like this, I need to do some prep work on this. I can use the saw to take off the smaller parts that are gonna go in the brush hopper, or I could just break them off like this if the material is brittle enough to allow you to do that. Your strength and comfort level will vary. This piece, I need to trim it up a little bit. So I'm gonna take that piece off. I'm comfortable sending that through the brush hopper. I'm gonna cut this piece right there. Now I've got this little kink on it. I think that'll go through. I'll need to pay attention to this. It's not a very big angle change, but this may end up getting stuck in there. If it were any more significant than that, I would probably cut that. Like this, I would not send this through. It's got too much of a curve. So at this knot, I'm gonna send that through, and even this one, I'm gonna cut at this knot. And same thing, I'm just prepping some wood here. You could do this as you're operating the machine. The way I like to do it is I want to conserve my fuel. It's expensive enough. I don't need to run the machine needlessly. What I tend to do is I'll prep a pile of wood or so and feed it into the machine, stop the machine, repeat as necessary. I got candidates for the brush hopper. I can go in there. That can go in there. I don't like this bend, so I'm gonna deal with this. So this piece, I think I would not try to attempt to put this piece through the machine. It's kind of a funny angle. It starts to get a little bit wide, but due to the geometry of this piece, I would call this a reject piece. So we'll throw that in the pile number 3. Now, with a run like this, as long as it's reasonably straight and you're comfortable with managing feeding this into the machine carefully, you can handle it. There's really no length restriction outside of those 2 factors. Because of this larger diameter, it could give us problems. So take care of it like that, and I think we'll be in business. So we got a pretty good little pile here. Let's start shredding. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the brush. I'll move to the larger sticks and we'll make some short work of this. Stuck in there. Don't put your hand in. Get yourself another stick. Try to push it through. got to be careful with the larger stuff. You see how I just stalled that out? Let it power down. That wasn't so bad at all. When you're feeding the sticks into this chute here, you got to be careful. You don't want to force the sticks and let the machine do the work. As you saw, one of the larger sticks, and this is oak, pine, I'm guessing would probably be a little easier for the machine to deal with, but the machine actually bogged down on that. If that happens, I wouldn't recommend trying to yank the stick out. You could carefully try to feed the stick in, but I think the best course of action is to let the machine do the work. If it does stall, take the stick out, start it back up, make sure there's no jam in it. If it's jammed, obviously you gotta stop, make sure the machine is off, clean it out, start the machine again, and reattempt to feed it through. As long as the stick is going and feeding through, the machine should get to it, even if it does stall. You have to use your judgment and whatnot. So one of the comments I was getting is wanting to see the material that comes out of the machine. That is something I didn't think about when I made the first video. That's a great point. What does this stuff look like? So we just fed it oak, leaves, small sticks, and larger branches. Let's take a look, see what it looks like. Okay. So that's a pretty good representation of the shredded oak that comes out of it. The larger stuff you're gonna get from your bigger branches. This finer material comes from smaller branches. So the output of the machine is going to vary based on what you feed it. You can see there's some larger chunks in there. Not everything gets shredded and slap chopped finely. If you are looking for finer material, feed it smaller stuff. I really don't care. I use this to kind of just dispose of yard waste, so I'm not too concerned about what the machine outputs. But that's a pretty good example of what oak looks like through the machine. All right, y'all, just some final thoughts. One thing I try to keep my eye on when I'm using this machine for an extended period of time, just make sure there's no leaves getting stuck on the muffler or even the engine block. I haven't had an issue yet, but that is something I try to pay attention to. I have had where leaves kind of fall out of here and collect when I have especially leafy material going in. And in that case, I stop the machine, make sure nothing's on fire, let it cool down a little bit, and I clear it out. I want to make sure nothing smolders on there and ignites the tank of fuel that's in close proximity. I do think Harbor Freight has a pretty good design of keeping that muffler with shield around it. It's probably me just being overly concerned about not having any fire. But if you do start to smell some burning wood, stop the machine, check it out, make sure there's no issue going on. Just something you want to make sure you keep your eye on. Other than that, just use common sense when you're operating it. Prep work with what you're feeding your machine, I think, is your best bet as far as smooth operation with the unit. If you get everything kind of sorted out, you can feed a lot of material into this thing in a short amount of time, and it just goes. But once you're done, you can always enjoy an adult beverage of your choosing. So hats off. If you've done a good job, celebrate, put the machine away, clean it up. It'll be ready for next time. Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, do your thing for the algorithm. And until next time, Matty-O, we'll see you.